Hello, and welcome to the second of our webinar series, Create Growth, Meet the Creative Experts. This webinar is funded by DCMS through the Create Growth D2 Hub, a University of Derby-led initiative to support the creative industries across Derbyshire. My name is Darren Chowings, and I work as a media consultant in residence for the University of Derby, supporting their Create Growth programme. Today, I'm really happy to be joined by Tom Millen, who will be covering using VR, AR, and XR in your visual art practice. At times, the session is going to include audience interaction using the Q&A function, which you can use by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen at the moment. Please note the whole thing is being recorded and will be made available on YouTube later this month. So that's really enough from me at the moment. I'm going to hand over to Tom, who's going to be able to give you his expert insights, and then we're going to move into a Q&A discussion moderated by me, but questions posed by you. We really want you to ask questions, so have a think whilst we're going, and we'll see where we end up. So, Tom, I'm going to bring you on now.
Hello, thanks, Darren, and great to be here. So, as Darren mentioned, my name's Tom Millen. I'm one of the directors of a company called Crossover Labs. We're a Sheffield-based production studio, curation, a group of curators, and also kind of a training organization that is really focused on where kind of art, technology, and storytelling meet together. So today I'm just going to start off by talking a little bit more about what I do in a bit more detail. Then I'll move on to talk about XR and immersive and what I mean by those things, and kind of give you some examples. And then finish by looking at some opportunities for your practice and how to incorporate XR into your creative practice. So, sorry. Yeah, so we're called Crossover Labs, and the reason that we're called Crossover Labs is because we're really interested in that crossover between different art forms, research and technology. And as I mentioned, we operate mainly across three arms, and those are curation. We run labs and training, and we also make things in our productions. But to have a look at each of those things in a little bit more detail. So next slide, please. So to start off with our curation, we have been curating selections of immersive work that appear at film festivals for over 10 years now. We started off by doing this at Sheffield Docfest, but since having programmed work there, we've gone on to work with many festivals internationally. So on the left there, you can see some of one of our curatorial exhibitions at CPH Docs in Copenhagen. This is a VR cinema, but we also do like kind of VR installations and things there. We also curate like large scale public installations at places like the Silver Salt Science and Media Festival in Germany. So this is a work called Borealis by an artist called Dan Acher, where they bring the Northern Lights into the middle of a city square. And then we have our own investigation into new routes to market for people working in the XR and immersive space called Electric Dreams. We've run that in a couple of places, but primarily we run that every year in Adelaide in Australia during the Adelaide Fringe Festival. And there we're up against kind of circus, cabaret, comedy, and we're trying to lure people in out of the Australian summer into a dark room to put VR headsets on their heads and pay us for the privilege. So we get that money and we cover our costs, but then we do a kind of revenue share with the artists that we present there as well to see if it's possible to kind of create this self-sustaining model of exhibition. Next slide, please. So we originally set up as a training organization. So the labs in Crossover Labs stands for the kind of training that we do. initially we were bringing creative professionals together in order to explore the potential of new technologies. So on the left there, you can see this was a lab we ran for Channel 4 TV commissioners back in 2010. And there we were trying to explore the potential of a thing called the internet and kind of Web 2.0, and persuade them of the fact that their audiences of the future would basically be consuming TV programming on their personal devices and online. I think we'll prove right in that regard. We continue to run labs like that where we bring artists or creatives together to experiment around new forms of technology. So in the middle there, you can see a lab that we were running with Indigenous storytellers in Australia, all focused on kind of looking at new ways of telling stories using virtual reality. And then we also have like kind of professional development programs. So that the picture on the right shows a CPH lab where people apply with their projects that are kind of just getting off the ground or kind of midway through development, and they come on one of our programs in order to hone their ideas and get them ready for market or realization. Next slide, please. And so the final thing that we do is we make projects as well ourselves. So we have now produced, I think, 9 live cinema archive documentaries. And these are collaborations between a particular film archive, usually from the BFI, film director, and contemporary musicians. And they're designed so that we can screen these films on TV, or they can go to cinemas and film festivals. But primarily, they're made so that they can be screened live with a live accompaniment from the band or like an orchestra, as you can see in the middle there. So we've collaborated with all kinds of contemporary musicians. That's Jarvis Cocker conducting an orchestra in front of our film called The Big Melt at the Crucible in Sheffield. And then on the right, you can see the band Sea Power performing live at Latitude in front of our film From the Sea to Land Beyond. And the important thing that we've kind of come to learn from doing a series of films like this is that the power of the collaboration is not just in its kind of creative output, but it's also that it's bringing audiences from kind of the 3 strands within each of those films that we wouldn't usually attract. So an archive film maybe always kind of attracts a certain audience. Maybe if you have a particular documentary filmmaker attached, then that gets kind of a little bit of a wider audience. But the moment that you can then attach a contemporary musician to it and give them equal creative control, then suddenly you have a whole nother audience that opens up to you. And as a result, these films have gone to loads of different places, including film festivals, music festivals. They've been shown in a salt cave in Poland, and 2 of them have even been exhibited at the Museum of Modern Art, or MoMA, in New York. And moving on, we also, of course, produce work that is kind of in the immersive and interactive space. Can we move to the next slide, please? So the first, oh, sorry, back one. So the first one of these was based on archive and was called Easter Rising. It was the BBC's first outside documentary commission in VR. And here we used archive of a tape recording. It was recorded in the 80s to recreate the moments, the memories of a person who went through the Easter Rising in 1916. We continue to kind of collaborate with different art forms all the time. So in the center there, you can see a performance from the electronic music DJs, Mirthovic and Tharuda. And here we're collaborating with them to kind of Indian DJs and the BFI archive to produce live shows that incorporate archive footage, objects from collections across the UK, and artificial intelligence and game engines in order to create these kind of amazing live visuals that take you on an Indo-futurist trip. into kind of South Asian heritage that is all currently being held in kind of British collections here. And then finally, we recently won the XR Award at South by Southwest for an app called Consensus Gentium, which was created by the artist Karen Palmer. And this is a experience for iPhone, so you can actually download it now. It is available for free on the store, and it uses the front-facing camera to track your eye gaze and your facial expressions, and uses that as a kind of navigation method through a branching narrative. And the branching narrative that it takes you on is kind of a story that's set in the near future, where there's an oppressive government that's come into force, and there are all kinds of kind of smart surveillance technologies being used on the populace, and you have to navigate a story set within that world. So I guess in summary, we do a wide variety of things, but essentially wherever there is art and technology kind of colliding, that's where we sort of find ourselves a lot of the time. Next slide, please. Yes, so just worth briefly mentioning that the other thing that we're currently doing is we're one of the consortium members leading a new program of funding and artist support called Immersive Arts. And this program aims to kind of give to heighten the amount and the quality of immersive art being produced in the UK today. But I can provide some links for you to have a look at that in a little bit more detail later. So next slide, please. So firstly, just start off by kind of defining what is immersive art. And this is the definition that we're using for the Immersive Arts program. It's not the only definition, and there is room for interpretation left in here on purpose, but I think it's useful to kind of set out my stall to show you kind of what I mean by immersive art. And what I mean is art that uses technology to actively involve the audience and that also bridges physical and digital spaces. And so a big part of what we mean by kind of immersive art is obviously XR. So next slide, please. And to make sure that everybody's on the same page, when I'm talking about XR, which stands for extended reality, it's really just a catch-all term for 3 R's that sit underneath it. And those are virtual reality, or VR, augmented reality, or AR, and mixed reality, MR. We can have a look at each of those in a little bit more detail. So the first one is virtual reality. Next slide, please. So in a virtual reality experience, the audience member is fully immersed in the digital world, to the extent that the physical world becomes almost non-existent in its entirety. So in this example, which is We Live in an Ocean of Air by Marshmallow Laser Feast, the audience member there is stood up with their headset on, but all around them they can only see the virtual world, and they're kind of interacting with purely digital objects that are not kind of that they can't touch or feel. And there are a couple of little extra kind of trackers and things going on there, but as far as they're concerned, they're kind of fully enveloped in that virtual world. And next slide, please. The second thing is augmented reality. So augmented reality, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with things like Pokemon Go, but it basically creates a digital overlay on our real world in order to create like a kind of composite image. So usually these are experienced through like mobile devices or iPads, and places that virtual object into the physical space using like a pass-through camera effectively. So this is an experience, this is a virtual version of Ai Weiwei's Gilded Cage, and it takes place as part of a group of artworks that tour, augmented reality artworks that tour botanical gardens around the world. So it allows them to travel really kind of cheaply, I guess, around the world and reach like huge audiences. And then finally, we've got mixed reality. So where virtual reality is completely enveloping you in the digital world, and augmented reality is kind of creating a composite image. Mixed reality is blending the physical and the digital world to the extent where the physical and digital objects can interact with each other. So an example of that might be you might be wearing a headset and you have the pass-through camera, an object, you might drop a virtual ball on the table, but it will roll along the table, and when it reaches the edge, it can drop off because it's interacting in simpatico kind of with the physical world around us. So this is a project called Playing with Reality, and it's an investigation into kind of, not an investigation, it shares a lived experience of 4 people living with kind of ADHD. And it augments the world around you and kind of interacts with your physical space. So XR, including these 3 terms, are a big part of what we mean by immersive art, but it also doesn't end there. Next slide, please. So you have things like immersive installations, so things that use digital technology to create immersive spaces that don't need any kind of head device. You don't have to wear anything at all. So this is New Nature at the Dragon Room at Mercer Labs in New York, and it's using 500,000 synchronized LEDs all around the space, together with mirrors to create a shifting sculptural immersive landscape around you. Similar things might be like the Outernet at Tottenham Court Road, if anyone's familiar with that, or things from teamLab in Japan. Next slide, please. And it doesn't just have to be visual in terms of what we mean by immersive art. You can hack other senses as well, so such as hearing. So in this piece, The Encounter, which is a theatre play by the theatre company Complicité, the audience is equipped with binaural headphones, and then the actor is on stage together with this microphone. So this head on the stick is actually a microphone, an ambisonic microphone. And by doing lots of different kind of auditory tricks, he can transport the audience on a trip to become lost in the Amazon rainforest. Next slide, please. And we can also hack other senses as well. So this is a virtual reality project called Symbiosis, which is, it offers a kind of speculative future where humanity has had to fuse our biology with other organisms to survive a climate catastrophe. And when you take part in this experience, you embody one of several life forms. So when I did it, I was a slime mold. But I think this guy here is a frog or a toad. And as well as virtual reality and kind of headphones, it's also, you can see he's also wearing this like haptic suit. So that haptic suit is constricting and inflating, and also liquids are pouring around it at various moments to give you like the embodied sense of becoming one of these organisms. Also, they use scent. Each animal has a different scent as you go through the experience, and you're also fed different snacks during the experience, so you can taste what it's like to be one of these organisms. Next slide, please. And then finally, when thinking about kind of XR, I think often one of the things that's leveled at it is that it's a disconnected and a solitary experience, and that you're kind of experiencing it in your own bubble, but it doesn't have to be that way. So this is a show that was at the National Theatre a few years ago by Canadian playwright Jordan Tannehill, called Draw Me Close. And in this, the audience member is wearing the headset there, and you're together with a live actor who is wearing a motion capture suit, and she's playing your mother. And she can kind of hug you, she can hand you things, draw pictures with you, and then at the end of the experience, tuck you into bed at night. And so, yeah, so like it can actually be this kind of powerful moment of connection between an audience and a performer, or audience members like with each other. So the things that I have kind of shown you are kind of really disparate, but the thing that connects all of them together is actually that they're all powered by the game engine. Next slide, please. And I think this is quite an important thing to note, because it's clear that video games are becoming the kind of dominant medium of our era. And I'm not the only person to think that. Hans Ulrich Obrist, the artistic director of the Serpentine, also says that video games are to the 21st century what movies were to the 20th and novels were to the 19th century. And there's now 3.9 billion active gamers worldwide, which is nearly 40% of the planet, and that is growing. Next slide, please. And I think looking beyond video games and the breakthroughs that kind of it becoming the dominant medium of our era, it means that the game engine, the thing that powers those video games, is becoming the kind of dominant form of expression of the 21st century. And so you can see this having its effect across all kinds of industries. So I've given examples in previously from art, from theatre, from kind of massive installations, from sound and music. But it's also being used in kind of non-headset based work and non kind of immersive based work. So such things like the Mandalorian are now using virtual production techniques. So if you're not familiar with what I mean by that, basically you can see there's a screen behind the actor and the crew member there. That's a LED wall or a giant projection surface, and that is a real-time rendered game engine generated environment behind them. And so it means that actors don't have to talk to kind of balls on sticks and stand in front of green screens anymore. They can actually be re-immersed back into the landscapes and kind of the environments and with the characters that they're supposed to be kind of reacting to. It also means that directors can change the lighting conditions, can add objects in, can take them away, just live there on the set, which is like a huge breakthrough for film and TV. And game engines are being felt across all kinds of disciplines. So from obviously engineering, things like film, but they're being used in journalism as well, and across all of the art forms. So next slide, please. So I think what it's clear to see is that there's now this sort of unifying technology that is smashing silos between previously siloed industries. And I think it's particularly being keenly felt in the creative industries. I think that we could also bring artificial intelligence into this and how that is also breaking down these boundaries between the creative industries. And what this convergence means is that there's absolutely new and exciting opportunities to play together and collaborate within this thing called the game engine, and to build a new art form in our own image. Next slide, please. So I think this is important to note because David Olusoga, the broadcaster and historian, who I'm sure you're familiar with, actually recognizes this kind of the fact that there's a new medium emerging and also this opportunity to build something in our own image. And in this column he wrote for The Guardian, he was comparing XR to TV. And what he says is that television is an old medium with a long established internal culture, one that developed over the decades and from the outset was exclusive rather than inclusive. A new medium has arrived in the world with no history and to an extent, no cultural baggage. The original sins of the television and film industries, their exclusivity, their metropolitan focus, their tendency to privilege middle-class outlooks, and their long histories of misogyny should and potentially can be left behind and prevented from infecting VR and AR. I think that's a pretty good first objective to have in terms of kind of birthing a new art form. Next slide, please. So that's all well and good, but why does it matter so much that artists and creatives get involved in kind of using XR and immersive tech in their work right now? Well, I think it's important because what we're often told is that enterprise drives innovation and innovation drives enterprise, but I don't think that's true. I think that actually creativity always precedes innovation. Because creativity is the development of alternative ideas and out of the box thinking. And that's the thing that artists are really good at and creative people are really good at, innovation is basically just applied creativity. When the spark of a new idea is turned into a novel business idea or a novel process, right? So we've already seen how VR has given rise to virtual production, which is transforming film and TV production for The Mandalorian and others. But what it means is we have the ability to directly influence the art, media, and technology of the future by getting creative with these platforms in order to kind of insert ourselves into this this equation on this slide that I stole and then added creativity to. Next slide, please. But how are these like immersive technologies currently performing? So I really like this graph. You may well have seen this graph before, but this is known as Amara's Law. It was created by Roy Amara, who was the former president for the Institute of the Future. And he put this thing together about 25 years ago. And basically what it shows is it shows the impact of technology over time. And on the pink line, that shows how we as humans and societies generally think about the future. So that's how we think about how any given technology, how it's going to impact our lives. So we kind of actually I'll just go into the S curve first, and then the black curve is how the technology is actually the kind of impact that it really has on our lives. So as you can see from the graph, in the short term, we tend to really overestimate how much influence any given technology is going to have on our lives. And it kind of sort of underperforms for a long time until it starts to rise. And there's a moment on the S curve where it crosses over and it starts to have an outsized impact on our lives than we would ever predict. So what it basically says is that we tend to overestimate the effect of a technology in the short term and underestimate the effect of a technology in the long run. And really what it's saying is that social change is always slower than technological change. So we shouldn't expect to see the immediate global effects of immersive, but we will certainly see it sooner than many people think, is kind of what Amara's Law says. In terms of XR and VR, I think, being an optimist, that we are currently just to the right of where this line crosses over this S-curve. I think people are starting to underestimate how much impact immersive technologies are going to have on our lives. When we come to AI, I think we're still to the left. So I think we're still overestimating kind of the amount that the impact that AI will have on our lives. But in the long run, obviously, it's going to have more of an outweighed impact than we could ever anticipate. And we've been here before. So this is a Daily Mail article from the year 2000 says that the internet may just be a passing fad as millions give up on it. This cycle of kind of high expectations followed by misplaced cynicism is a syndrome. And I think we're really at that moment that maybe the internet was around the year of 2000, when James Chapman was predicting that it was all over. Next slide, please. Sorry, that was the slide. Next slide, please. So, and I think we can see that right here, right? So scenes like this are pretty laughable to us now, right? People out eating lunch with their Apple Vision Pros on. But actually what Amara's Law tells us is that these will be way more commonplace, and it will be more commonplace sooner than any of us expect. And Tim Cook says that in the same way that the Mac introduced us to the personal computing and iPhone introduced us to mobile computing, Apple Vision Pro will introduce us to spatial computing, which is kind of the next step in terms of kind of the way that we're going to experience the world. And this is what I'm talking about this kind of outweighed influence of these devices on our lives in the future. And that next step is spatial, and it's going to be driven by spatial engines, which are basically game engines. And yes, right now there are huge challenges to reaching audiences. It's prohibitively expensive. The tech is really awkward. It looks stupid, and there are limited uses for it. But what we need is people with creativity to look at this tech and find new ways of using it that kind of drive the innovation of the future. Because this is going to be the delivery platform for the art of the future. Next slide, please. But why does any of this matter? Why does kind of tech matter? Should we care? Well, I think that's because art matters. And I love this quote from Olivia Laing, the author and essayist, who described the power of art a couple of years ago, and it's important in turbulent political times. She says that we're so often told that art can't really change anything, but I think it can. It shapes our ethical landscapes. It opens us up to the interior lives of others. It is a training ground for possibility. It makes plain inequalities, and it offers other ways of living. And I think that pretty much sums up kind of why our creativity is important, and getting our message out there. And I think it's quite well kind of evidenced by things like Mr. Bates, right? It often feels like we can't change anything with our art, but you come along with something that was a creative endeavor, a TV program, Mr. Bates versus the Post Office, and you can actually have like kind of physical, like kind of legislative change. But obviously, Mr. Bates was accompanied by a whole lot of press coverage. It was on primetime TV, and it also had a marketing campaign like kind of associated with it. So maybe the problem that we face as artists is not that the biggest challenge we have is kind of changing people's mind and making powerful art. It's actually getting attention for the work that we're making. And in order to try and kind of dissect this a little bit, I wanted to have a look at some of the people who are in the business of kind of grabbing our attention. Next slide, please. So the economist Herbert A. Simon talks about this idea of the attention economy, right? And the attention economy, he says, is that in an information-rich world, the wealth of information means that there is a dearth of something else, a scarcity of whatever it is that information consumes. And what information consumes is rather obvious. It consumes the attention of its recipients. Hence, a wealth of information, i.e. the internet, creates a poverty of attention. Next slide, please. And Matt Locke from the London agency StoryThings goes on from this a little bit further and when he talks about the kind of assumption that audiences now have short attention spans. He says that audiences don't have short attention spans; they have short decision-making spans, because we know that actually, like 5-second, 10-second content on things like TikTok exists, but also we're seeing video games that are 120 hours plus. Long form content on YouTube is constantly pushed to you and is getting millions of views. And the rise of like streamable TV series in recent years has like outdone kind of the need to go and see films. So really, it's not our attention spans that are suffering. It's the fact that we're making those decisions much more quickly. So really, what we're trying to do is work out how to assign our attention much more quickly. Next slide, please. Another economist, Richard Lanham, describes in his 2006 book, The Economics of Attention, how the economy, in the attention economy that we now live in, that basically style has traded places with substance, because it's all about how we effectively and efficiently allocate this attention that we all have a poverty of, right? And so anything that is style, anything that's brash, sexy, and that we quickly understand is going to jump out to us and appeal to us much more than something that kind of looks strange and different and that we're kind of not and kind of boring to us, I guess. So people don't want stuff anymore, right? They kind of want this style. They want they want these quick decisions so that they're allocating their attention most effectively. We can also see that this kind of rejection of stuff is happening, particularly in kind of younger generations. So in a 2018 survey by Eventbrite, they found that 78% of millennials and Gen Z would now rather spend money on experiences rather than physical items. This is the thing that's kind of often referred to as the experience economy, and I'm going to go into that in just a sec. But I think the same is true for our art and media, because art and media is actually regulated through these stylistic devices and stylistic platforms, such as kind of these platforms that exist on the internet. Next slide, please. Because the people who are winning in this attention economy are the smartphone manufacturers and the social media companies, but actually those smartphone manufacturers and social media companies are the people that are producing these XR devices. They're stylistic devices. They're literally attention-grabbing devices. They're designed so they're like on your face that like you can't give your attention to anything else. So I guess what I'm sort of trying to say is that maybe we can push back and save the world and make change in the world with the devices that have been sent to destroy us. Next slide, please. So back to economics, just briefly. So I mentioned before this idea of the experience economy, and you might well have kind of come across this, but the idea is that we're currently living in an experience economy and have been since the late 80s, early 90s. I think it was the mid 90s, two economists called Pine and Gilmore put together this thesis of the experience economy. And what they said was that we had moved around that time from a service economy into an economy driven by experience. And so what that kind of looks like against this graph, if you take coffee, is that you have a commodity. So you have coffee that you harvest, and then that gets turned into a good. So it gets turned into the coffee beans. It's dried and made into coffee beans. Or maybe it gets made into ground coffee. And then that good is provided as a service. And that service might be you go to a coffee shop and you buy a cup of coffee, and the coffee is the product, right? What was happening in the late 80s, early 90s is that things like Starbucks were appearing, and kind of coffee shop culture started to emerge. And actually what happened was that the coffee itself, the cup of coffee, was transactionary. Actually, what you wanted was to be in the coffee shop and have the experience of being in the coffee shop, because you want to be in there to meet a friend, or you might want to go and do some work, or you just want to relax. And the coffee is actually just like a kind of a pass key in order to get to that experience. Now, Pine and Gilmore have recently come along with a new suggestion on this graph. Says that we're now moving towards a transformation economy. So these are experiences that will have long-lasting kind of transformational effects on your health or well-being. So it's not just coffee anymore, it's coffee that's going to make you healthier, happier, and more focused than ever before. And I think we can see these kind of trends emerging within the XR space. Next slide, please. So you may have heard about this piece. It's a project called Clouds Over Sidra. It's a little bit old now, but I think it was quite key in kind of noticing the transformational effects that VR and XR can have, and resulted in one of the creators, Chris Milk, and his TED Talk calling it the VR, the empathy machine. In it, you're transported to a Za'atari refugee camp where you meet a young girl called Sidra, and she literally just takes you on a tour of a camp to meet her family and friends. And the other director of this piece was a guy who worked at the UN at the time called Garbo Aurora. And he talks about how he saw something really changing with this piece in terms of like kind of the UN content that they would usually put out. So usually they'd put out a UN video in response to a humanitarian disaster. They'd send a camera crew there, and they would film some shots, and they'd put it online and ask for donations, and they'd get X number of donations. Then they'd re-edit that video with a celebrity kind of speaking over it and giving kind of an appeal. and you'd get X more donations as a percentage of the people that watched it. What seemed then they used this documentary, a VR documentary, as a fundraising tool, and the donations went up massively as a percentage compared to the number of people that had seen it. So actually, what they were seeing was this kind of the transformative power of XR as kind of a media delivery platform. Next slide, please. And I really felt this transformational sort of power in 2014 when we programmed a piece called Door into the Dark at Sheffield DocFest. And in it, you're kind of blindfolded, you're given some headphones, and you're just given a rope. You're told to follow the rope. And as you follow the rope through this dark space, you're kind of you're fed stories of people who had found themselves profoundly lost at one point or another in their lives. And as you go further, you're like kind of scrambling along the edges of cliffs, and you're going through jungles, and you end up on a giant bed. And then eventually you get to a point and you're told that you have to let go of the rope and step into the space for yourself. And it gives you that moment of agency that suddenly something just kind of clicked in my brain, I guess. And it's sort of stuck with me ever since, because it's a really empowering feeling to just kind of give yourself over to an experience in that way. Amy Rose, who's one of the creators of Door into the Dark, recently said, "I fell in love with a different way of doing things, where the story and the ideas got inside you because they asked something more from you than just sitting down and watching from the sidelines." And I think that sense of agency that XR and immersive gives you is really powerful in terms of creating a transformational experience. So I've recently been doing some, last year did some work on kind of impact of art and storytelling together with an institute at UAL. And when we were doing some research, we came across this two loops model, which this model basically tries to capture how system change happens within the kind of change making or journalism space. But I think it's really interesting in also looking at it in terms of kind of new technologies and also like kind of new art movements as well. And it basically says, if you can kind of decode it, that where you have a dominant system over the top, dominant systems always reach a point where they go into decline. And at that point, you find these kind of pioneers, and the pioneers start building an emergent system. And they do that through connecting and building networks and forming communities that then go on to kind of overtake and excel way beyond kind of this dominant system. Dominant system here might be like legacy media, for example. Maybe we're talking about film and TV. And right now, I think that we've got like this moment of an emergent system coming together and being formed, but it's quite nascent. And that's what I want to give you the sense of, that now is the time to get involved in this, to be able to shape these platforms of the future and be able to shape what this kind of dominant system of the future might actually look like, because we actually do have the opportunity to do this. Next slide, please. And it's easier now than it ever has been before. Their networks are still establishing themselves, but it's still early enough days to be one of the pioneers, because those silos are being smashed between industries, and we're working out how to work with each other and do new things together. AI tools are now making it so easy for creatives to get experimental in more and more powerful ways as well. So this is a video game that was created entirely using code created by ChatGPT, for example. Also, processes like photogrammetry about 10 years ago would have taken the best part of like a day to produce an object. Now you can do it instantly using just up-to-date smartphone, using kind of LiDAR cameras. And these kind of leaps forward that we've seen in the last few years just make it more and more accessible all the time for people to get involved. Next slide, please. So I kind of wanted to end on this. This is, some of you might be familiar with it. It's okay if you're not, but this is what you get when you open the Unity game engine. which is effectively a reality building tool with unlimited horizon. So that horizon you see in the distance is only to kind of so you can navigate the space as a human, but really it doesn't exist. It's a limitless horizon. It has limitless possibilities. So I wanted to end on this space, a blank canvas, to get you to kind of ask yourselves, this is kind of where the future sits in this gray space right there in front of you. So what will you create and who will you work with in order to do it? Next slide. Thank you very much. Now we're going to do a few questions.
Thank you very much, Tom. Really interesting stuff, and obviously there's a lot to digest and think about. I'm going to have a look at some of the questions that are coming in through the Q&A app, but I've got a few myself as well. The first I wanted to really ask you was around like access and barriers. So if I'm inspired right now, I'm excited by what you're talking about, but I have no idea where to start. Like how do you begin? Like how do you begin making work in this way if this is the first time you've heard about it, but you love it?
Yeah, cool. So I think that one of the first ways to start getting involved is to just there are loads of opportunities to go and see work at the moment, and a lot of them are still free. Like I mentioned earlier in my presentation, we're starting to try and work out like kind of models in which we can ticket it so that we're creating like sustainable models for artists and creatives. But right now it's like really easy to just get out there and see work um, at a variety of like festivals around the UK. So there's the Alternate Realities exhibition at Sheffield Doc Fest, for example. Also at is it not Encounters at the Short Film Festival in York. They have a pretty good exhibition as well. So get out there and do that stuff. I'll plug Immersive Arts. We actually do have like a we can fund you to explore through that program. So we've just closed the applications for the first round, but there will be another round opening again this year, and you can get access to some funding so that you can explore what this means for your practice for yourself. I also think that things are just getting so easy now that a lot of these tools are also just free, and it's really easy to just start like download them and fiddle. So game engines like Unity and Unreal are free until you're making over a set X amount of money, which realistically you're probably not going to be with an art project anyway. So they're basically free forever. And I think you can just download them and start having a play about with kind of like what's possible there.
Hey, thank you. Okay, so I've got a good one from Lucy here. So how technologically able does a person need to be to get involved in XR? Um, and yeah, just to note, they've also applied for immersive arts funding.
Yeah, and I think this also applies. I guess my answer is going to apply a little bit to the question from Caron as well, about not having to be artists in order to like kind of create this. Not everyone in the space will be artists. So, and the flip side of that is that I don't think that artists should be expected to have to necessarily learn to become developers in order to create this work. There's a whole, this is the thing about kind of this leveling of the playing field and collapsing silos between these industries, that there's a whole load of skilled game developers, animators, artists out there who are ripe for collaborating with, but the kind of the artistic community has never had really like a need to collaborate with those people before, or an opportunity to. But now we can kind of break those things down and collaborate with those people in order to kind of make things happen. So an artist can continue to be an artist without having to learn to code, without having to learn kind of 3D modeling tools, because those people with those skills already exist out there. And I think things are only made better through like kind of collaborations with people like that.
Okay, cool. So just as an extension to that as well, um, in the same way, like contemporary art forms might have had some backlash with traditional types of art in art schools. Have you, or do you anticipate a backlash from the uh, traditional art makers of the world, in the sense of this technology is not good for us? It's um, potentially damaging to traditional art forms like painting,
Mm.
sculpture. Yeah, how do you see that?
Yeah, that kind of criticism was leveled at the camera when it came along, thinking that people thought it would replace portrait painting,
Yeah,
which hasn't happened, and it's like I guess been happening throughout history. I don't think what I'm not trying to be the iPad advert, trying to crush all art forms in history into like a
yeah,
single device. I don't think that that's going to be a good approach for anybody. What I think I'm proposing a new art form that can sit on its own outside of any of those art forms, but like kind of in conversation with them. Um, uh, just as kind of film comes after photography, comes after painting, comes after kind of novels. Like all of those things have continued to exist and have their thing that makes them very special. And I think in the immersive and XR space, we're still working out what it is that makes this particular platform or like kind of form of art particularly special, like what the superpowers are that it has, that will continue to take it like kind of into the future.
cool. Thank you. And talking about superpowers, so Rosemary in the Q&A is started to talk about arts therapy. So she runs an arts therapy company in Derby, and they're thinking about using this within their service. You mentioned certain works having a long-lasting emotional effect with you. How do you
Mhm.
see XR being beneficial in the health therapy space?
Yeah, there's a lot of projects and work going on around therapy and health and well-being. Um, I guess for a couple of reasons, like it allows you to put people into quite a safe space to explore creativity, for example, because are you're a kind of virtual world where you're in with limitless possibilities, but it's also yours, and you decide how much of that you want to show anybody. I think that's quite a powerful thing for people that are maybe exploring art and art practices for the first or like kind of nascent steps. Um, Also, it's in terms of like one of the kind of powerful, I guess, psychological uh, aspects of like virtual reality in particular is this the fact that it's quite locative, so it actually tricks our brain into thinking it's been to places. Like your brain very quickly just kind of believes what it's seeing and believes that it's in the space, and that works pretty like that works very powerfully with the way that our brains work, because our brains actually like kind of geotag our memories and our emotions and the way that we're thinking, right? So if you've ever been to a party that only happened in one room or only happened in one venue, especially if there was some alcohol involved, like it can be quite difficult to piece together the evening's events because they're all logged to the same kind of geography. However, you remember a party or a night out a lot better if it happens over multiple venues. Like our brain kind of geotags like how we were feeling or what happened according to the location that we find ourselves in, right? And so if you can create those virtual spaces and then also create feelings and emotions, then you have the ability to kind of create like either places of relaxation or places of calm or places of like kind of um safety, I guess.
Cool. Okay, thank you very much. So Anna here is not really a question, but she said that she's found the session really interesting. and is considering using this type of technology to promote work and to engage students in what they do. Um, in spaces where engagement is low, do you think using technology like this would be helpful or distracting when it comes to trying to engage new audiences or existing audiences that aren't engaged already?
Yeah. So I think what a lot of these devices offer is like there's still a like just a coolness effect in a lot of places, but that is having diminishing returns. I think it's becoming more and more of uh, um, a practice like kind of engagement technique, and so you have to make sure that the content that you're delivering is also engaging. Like you can't just rely on the technology anymore. You also have to make sure that the content like fits. Like, why is it on this platform? And also, like, kind of how are you exploiting all of the benefits of that platform to make something that's like truly engaging and powerful for whichever audience yeah, you're creating it for.
Cool, thank you very much. And I think just as a bit of a close, because we're neatly running to time. Um, if other people on the call are as excited by this as I am, and feeling very inspired by what you've said, where do they go next to find inspiration? Where is this work hidden?
Yeah, and that's one of the big problems, right? Is access to a lot of the works that I've talked about. So a lot of them exist with it still within like a kind of film festival circuit, which means that they're sort of they can be quite difficult to access. Um, but uh, I would point people towards the immersive arts program for sure. Sign up to our newsletters because beyond funding, we're also offering lots of opportunities to get involved in like seeing work, conferences and events, and training and things like that. Um, I would definitely point people towards like looking at a few of the festivals, especially in the UK, that you can attend. Um, and if you've got access to a quest, then you can you have to dig around a little bit on the store to find like the good work. But there are a couple of XR distributors who you can look at their website and then find like kind of where the creative stuff is. So just a couple to highlight would be Astria, Astrea, and also Divergent, both French companies. Um, but if you have a look at what they're distributing, a lot of it will be available on the Quest store, and you can just like start to get a little bit more involved with some of the more creative aspects of like kind of VR that's being put out there because Meta just wants you to buy games. But there is some narrative and artistically like interesting and challenging work like on those devices.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you very much, Tom. It has been an absolute pleasure. For more support and if you want to connect with Tom, you can connect with him on LinkedIn. I'll be putting that in the chat now. So for anyone that would like to do that, that is available to you right now. I'm going to say bye to Tom, but before we completely go, I just want to tell you about an upcoming webinar we've got going. So as you know, this is the second of the Create Growth Meet the Creative Experts webinars, and we've got one more coming up in March. There's not a registration link available yet, but I want to give you a first look and give you the opportunity to save the date for our third and final installment, which is with Geo Law and Rob Lee, and it's all about how to scale your creative business, mural art, and large scale graphic commissions. So this is for anyone that's already working in illustration, graphic design, maybe large scale animation as well, and projection. I think you really get a lot out of it. Both are really exciting artists, so please do save the date for that. I think that is it, really. It's been a pleasure to meet and talk to you, Tom, today. Really great to be broadcasting to all you lovely people, and I hope you've enjoyed it. So until March and until the third webinar, enjoy the rest of your day, And thank you very much. Have a good one.